So now let's look at 7 design concepts from the world of graphic design that have real applications to our world of slide design. So the first concept is called signal-to-noise ratio, and this is actually borrowed from the more technical fields such as radio communications. So you can think of signal as the message, and the noise, of course, is the clutter, the part that just interferes with that message. You know, on your radio, of course, if you have a low signal-to-noise ratio, the noise, of course, is the static, and that's what gets in the way of the message. In our world, then, the signal are the visual elements that contribute to our message, and the noise is anything that detracts from our message. So noise can include things like, footers and logos and decorative elements that really don't add anything, and they act then as noise, even though we're not conscious of it sometimes. It really gets in the way of our message. So when you look at this slide, what's the first thing that comes to mind? When I look at this, I see lots of noisy elements that just aren't necessary. For example, at the bottom, you see a footer. All these things, the date, the title, these really aren't necessary. The logo, not necessary. You can remove that. When you look at boxes, now a lot of default settings sometimes in slideware has boxes around text or around other elements. We don't need these lines around the text or even around the graph itself. When you look at the chart, the axis lines on the chart, vertical and horizontal, you really don't need those. You can either make them very, very thin or remove them altogether, because the bars actually will suggest lines anyway. And speaking of the bars are in 3D also with thick lines, and 3D is not necessary, especially when we're talking about 2D data, right? When you look at the bars, you'll notice that they're in many different colors, right? 6 different colors, 6 different bars. Why is that? There's no reason for that, right? That's just somehow decorative. I would suggest that you make them all one color, except if you wanted to have people look at a particular year. Let's say, for example, 2005 was the year that you wanted to point out. You could make that bar a different color. Now, what about the picture? Now, pictures, I'm actually a big fan of high quality photography in slides, but it's not always necessary. In this case, I think the photo actually detracts. It's just this sort of noise that detracts from this idea of just looking at the data. Data itself is visual. The data itself is graphical. So in this case, I don't think it really adds anything. And speaking of noise, what's the deal with bullet points? Whoever said that you should fill a slide with bullets and that this was an effective visual? Well, the thing is, actually, if most presentation books that you buy will suggest something like the 177 rule or a variation of that. What is the 177 rule? The 177 rule says basically that you should have only one main idea per slide. Well, that's a good idea. I agree with that. Insert only 7 lines of text maximum. Use only 7 words per line maximum. The question is, though, does this work? Is this method really good advice? Is this really an appropriate, effective visual? This slide has just 7 bullet points. Now, this slide is actually an example of a slide that would follow conventional wisdom about what is a good, simple slide. But this is not visual at all. This is a great example, actually, of noise, because we cannot read and listen at the same time. In this case, this kind of text on a slide just becomes clutter in my eyes, and it doesn't contribute to the person standing there, it doesn't contribute to the narrative. So the picture superiority effect is quite simple. It simply says that we remember pictures and photographs, for example, better than other forms such as words. And we all know this to be true. In fact, our most dominant sense is actually visual. So let's look at some examples here. All right, so look at this slide. Now, when the speaker presented against this slide, his main point was that blogs are like sharks because you have to keep your blog updated or it will die. People will lose interest. Just like a shark, if a shark doesn't keep moving, the shark will die, right? The thing is, this slide is not very visual. It's not visual at all, and the words are there in bullet points repeating what he's already said. Now, if you look at this slide instead, This slide is very visual and very effective to get the point across. Now, there are no words except blogs are like sharks. And in this sense, the words along with the picture becomes a powerful visual. And they don't get in the way at all of the presenter and his narrative. So his spoken word along with this full bleed photograph and his key point, blogs are like sharks, together make a very, very powerful and memorable message. But also keep this in mind, picture superiority doesn't just mean pictures or photography. It also means things like quantitative displays, bar charts or a line chart. That is also a strong visual element. So when we say picture, we really mean anything which isn't just text or noise on a slide. So the next concept is called empty space, sometimes called negative space, but I love the term empty space. You can see empty space used in graphic design, in layout design, web design, and of course in our world of slide design. The thing is, most people see empty space and want to fill it. And that includes not only in design, but even in their own homes, right? Oh, I have space over here. Let me fill it with more junk. So the thing about empty space is that empty space is not nothing. It's actually a powerful something. And when you leave that area empty, it actually contributes more to those visual elements that are in the positive space. Now, if you look at a lot of the Zen arts, you'll notice that there is balance, but it's not a symmetrical balance usually, it's more asymmetrical. And some people actually say that that's the opposite of balance, but you can also think of it in terms of balance, but asymmetrical balance. So you might have empty space in one area or a lot of empty space which balances out, let's say, deep sort of elements or very powerful elements on a different part of the slide. If you look at this slide here, you'll notice it's rather a traditional kind of slide with a title and bullet points, and there's not much empty space at all, or certainly not a good use of empty space. Now, instead, remember, we don't need the words on the slide, or so many words on the slide, because the presenter is going to be speaking those words. So look at this slide, this first one. You see the text element, hara hachibu, and the visual element on the right, but most of the slide is actually empty. And what these there's actually three elements. Most people might see two elements. They see the text and they see the visual, but there are actually three. And the thing is, they work in harmony to provide balance. They don't get in the way of each other. We're sometimes not conscious of this, but these three elements work in harmony and work in balance. It's asymmetrical balance, but it works very, very well to support our narrative visually. So the idea of empty space used in visuals is not just limited to the world of Zen, of course. It's something that we use in the Western world as well, in graphic design and other areas of visual design. And one thing that I think is really effective is this idea of rule of thirds, which originally sort of came from the golden mean. But the rule of thirds is used by many designers, especially photographers, when they're trying to compose an image. So let's look at some examples here in our world of slide design. So when you look at this slide, you'll notice that I actually put down a grid following the rule of thirds, so it's broken up into thirds. You'll notice that a strong visual element, the person running there, takes up the right third, and even the ground and the mountains take up the bottom third, and then the text element is over there in the upper left third. So it's not by accident, and there's large empty space there that is a really sort of natural space for the text, and it also naturally leads the eye from the right to the left. Here are some more examples of slides that use the rule of thirds to utilize effectively empty space.